In the shadow of Thor's hammer, a rune-carved codex washes ashore, whispering secrets of Greek fire, a weapon to burn the seas and defy the gods. Ragnhild Storm-Rider, a Viking captain bound by honor, leads her clan to hunt its source, facing treacherous fjords and the fate woven by the Norns. But as villages turn to ash and oaths are tested, a shadowy Byzantine serpent threatens to unravel the North's shield walls. Will Ragnhild's warband forge a saga of glory, or will the fire consume their names forever? Before we sail deeper into this saga, take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. The Norse world is full of forgotten stories, and this is just one carved in the runestone of time. If you crave epic Viking sagas, mysterious discoveries from the fjords, and the stories the skalds dared not tell, stay with us, because this tale will pull you into the mists of Midgard itself. In the year when the snows melted late, and the fjords still bore the scars of Harald Fairhair's wars, the longship Blood Eagle cut through the morning mist like a wolf's fang. Her prow, carved in the likeness of a screaming raven, parted. The black water, and behind her, the sky was already streaked with the smoke of burning villages. Ragnhild Storm-Rider stood at the helm, her cloak snapping in the wind, eyes fixed on the rebel ship ahead a battered Nair, its sail patched. With stolen cloth, its deck bristling with desperate men. The fjord narrowed, cliffs rising on either side like the jaws of some ancient beast. The air was thick with the scent of pine and ash, and the cries of gulls echoed above the thunder of wars. Ragnhild's voice rang out, sharp as a war horn. Steady, oars to the ready. We take them before the tide turns. Her crew moved as one, each a legend in their own right. Kwame the Chain-Breaker, his skin dark as midnight, hefted his great axe and grinned, the iron rings of his mail shirt glinting. Yuki Snow-Walker, silent as the falling snow of her homeland, crouched near the prow, eyes narrowed, a smoke bomb already in her hand. Grimnar Skull-Splitter, bare-chested and wild-eyed, pounded his axe against the rail, his laughter echoing. Off the stone, the rest of the warband braced for battle, their faces painted with ash and resolve. The rebel ship, crewed by former thralls, turned to fight. They hurled crude firepots clay jars filled with pitch and oil arcing through the air. One shattered on the Blood Eagle's deck, flames licking at the planks. Ragnhild leapt into the rigging, axes drawn, and with a cry that split the morning, she ordered the ram. The impact was thunder and splinters. The Blood Eagle's prow smashed into the Nair's side, sending men tumbling. Ragnhild flew from the mast, axes flashing, the crows dive and landed amidst the rebels, her blades carving a path through chaos. Kwame followed, his timber fall cleaving shields and bone alike. Yuki vanished in a swirl of smoke, reappearing behind a rebel archer, her sword whispering death. Grimnar, already lost to the red mist, spun through the melee, his blood tornadoes scattering foes like chaff. The battle was fierce, but the crew's skill was unmatched. The rebels fought with the fury of the desperate, their eyes wild, their voices raised in the old songs of bondage and hope. Kwame met their gaze and saw not enemies, but brothers men, who had once shared his chains. Their curses stung him. Traitor, oath-breaker. But he fought on, for the crew that had given him freedom, for the hope that blood need not always answer blood. Victory seemed certain. The last of the rebels fell, and the Blood Eagle's crew pressed forward, seeking the ship's hold. But then a scream, a rush of heat, The world erupted in fire. From below decks, a torrent of Greek fire burst forth, a weapon of legend, unseen in these northern lands. The flames clung to wood and flesh alike, burning with a hunger that water could not quench. Ragnhild shouted for retreat, her voice hoarse. The Blood Eagle's deck became a furnace, the air thick with smoke and terror. They leapt into the icy water, axes and shields abandoned. The rebel ship and the Blood Eagle both burned, their hulls locked in a fiery embrace. The fjord, once a place of beauty, was now a graveyard of ash and ruin. On the stony shore, the survivors dragged themselves from the water, coughing and shivering. Ragnhild knelt beside a dying rebel, his hands charred, his eyes bright with fever. He clutched a fragment of parchment, its edges blackened, strange symbols and diagrams still visible. Ragnhild pried it from his grasp, her heart pounding. The codex. Even in ruin, its secrets were clear diagrams of fire lances, formulas for explosive salts, words in Greek, Latin, and runes. A map was scrawled in the margin, a crude mark pointing west, across the sea, to a monastery in Ireland. Ragnhild rose, the codex fragment in her hand, her ship lost, her purpose sharpened to a blade's edge. The world had changed in a single morning. The old ways shield wall and axe duel were ashes on the wind. Now, fire and knowledge threatened to consume all. She looked to her crew, battered but unbroken, and spoke with the voice of the storm. We hunt not men, but the fire that would burn the world. To Ireland and the heart of this darkness, let none stand in our way. The saga had begun, and the north would tremble before its thunder. The fjord still smoldered behind them, as Ragnhild and her warband trudged inland, the charred codex fragment wrapped in oilskin at her belt. The loss of the Blood Eagle weighed on them all. A ship was more than wood and sail. It was hearth, shield, and kin, yet the fire had not broken them. If anything, it had forged their resolve anew. Their path led them to the hall of Jarl Asborn, whose seat overlooked the restless sea. The banners of his house blew wolves on a field of white hung limp in the damp air. The hall itself was a fortress, its walls thick with suspicion, for these were days of shifting loyalties. Harald Fairhair's shadow stretched long, and every jarl watched his neighbor with a hand on his sword. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mead and sweat. Warriors eyed the newcomers warily, hands never far from their blades. Ragnhild strode forward, her bearing that of a captain even without a ship. She knelt before the jarl, offering the codex fragment as proof of their tale. Jarl Osborn was a man of iron ice, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. He listened in silence as Ragnhild spoke of the fire weapon, the uprising, and the threat that now loomed over all the north. When she finished, he turned the fragment over in his hands, tracing the strange symbols with a calloused thumb. A weapon to burn the world, he mused, voice low. And you say it comes from the south, from the lands of the Greeks? Ragnhild nodded. We need a ship and your sanction. The trail leads to Ireland, to a monastery marked on this map. If we do not act, the fire will spread beyond any hope of quenching. The Jarl's gaze lingered on her, weighing loyalty against ambition. At last he nodded. You shall have both. But you will not go alone. He gestured, and two guards dragged forth a figure in chains, a woman, her hair dark as a raven's wing, her eyes haunted but unbowed. This is Sophia, the Jarl announced. A scholar from Byzantium, washed ashore months past. She claims to have knowledge of these southern fires. If she is what she says, she will be your guide. If not, he shrugged, the meaning clear. Sophia met Ragnhild's gaze, her voice trembling but resolute. I know the codex. I helped write it under duress, for a general who would see the world remade in fire. I escaped, but the knowledge is out. There is a master copy, and many fragments. If you wish to stop this, you will need me. Grimnar spat on the floor, his distrust plain. A witch and a foreigner. We should throw her to the wolves. Yuki's eyes narrowed, studying Sophia with the quiet intensity of a hunter. Kwame, remembering the chains that once bound him, offered. A nod of understanding. Ragnhild turned to the Jarl. We will take her, but we need a ship one built for war, not trade. Jarl Asborn smiled, cold and cunning. You shall have the Wyrm's tooth, finest in my fleet. But remember, should you fail, the fire will not spare my hull, nor yours. Go, and let the gods judge your worth. That night, as the crew gathered in the longhouse, the weight of fate pressed upon them. Sophia sat apart, her hands still trembling from the memory of chains. Ragnhild joined her, placing the codex fragment between them. Why help us? The captain asked, voice soft as the sea at dawn. Sophia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Because I have seen what these weapons do. I have seen cities burn, children turn to ash. I would see that knowledge buried, not spread. Ragnhild nodded, understanding the burden of guilt. Then we are bound by the same purpose. But know this betray us, and I will end you myself. Sophia met her gaze, unflinching. I would expect nothing less. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the scent of salt and smoke. The crew prepared for the forging of a new ship and a new warband. Oaths were sworn, blades sharpened, and the first threads of fate's tapestry were woven tighter still. In the flickering firelight, Ragnhild looked to her shield siblings Kwame, Yuki, Grimnar, and now Sophia, and felt the weight of destiny settle on her shoulders. The gods had set them on this path, and there would be no turning back. The Saga pressed onward, the shadow of the Jarl at their backs, and the fire of the south ahead. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Jarl's settlement, the sky a pale promise above the blackened fjord. The old shipwrights gathered at the water's edge, their hands calloused and sure, their voices rising in the ancient songs of oak and iron. The Wyrm's tooth would be born of this labor, a longship not just for war, but for the fate of the North itself. Ragnhild stood among her crew, the codex fragment safe at her side, watching as the keel was laid. Each plank was chosen with care, each nail driven with a prayer to Njord and Ran, gods of sea and storm. The scent of tar and fresh-cut pine mingled with the salt air, and the rhythm of hammers echoed like distant thunder. The forging of the warband was more than wood and steel. It was the testing of hearts. Grimnar eyed Sophia with open suspicion, his voice a growl. What does a scholar know of war? Let her prove her worth, or let her go. Sophia, her wrists, still raw from the Jarl's chains, met his gaze without flinching. I know the fire that nearly killed you. I know how to fight it. She knelt by the forge, mixing strange powders, and soon showed them how to coat their shields with a paste that would not burn. She taught Ragnhild the signs of Greek fire, its oily sheen, its acrid smoke, and how to douse it with sand, not water. Yuki watched Sophia with the eyes of a hawk, silent and inscrutable. One night, as the others slept, she approached the scholar, her words soft as falling snow. "You carry secrets like a blade. If you turn it against us, I will know." Sophia nodded, understanding the warning. "I have no more love for the men who made me write that book than you do. My only wish is to see it destroyed." Kwame, meanwhile, found a strange kinship with Sophia. Both were outsiders, marked by chains, one of iron, one of guilt. They spoke quietly by the fire, sharing stories of distant lands and lost families. In Sophia's eyes, Kwame saw not a witch, but a woman haunted by her own past. As the worm's tooth took shape, a new figure arrived. Tormund Wave Dancer, the navigator. His face was weathered by wind and grief, his eyes storm-bright. He had lost his village to a fire raid, his family to the chaos unleashed by the codex. Now, vengeance and duty bound him to Ragnhild's cause. Tormund walked the length of the new ship, running his hands over the timbers, whispering to the sea. "She ride the waves like a gull," he said, voice low. "But she need a crew as true as her keel." The days passed in toil and song. The warband learned to fight as one Grimnar's fury, tempered by Ragnhild's strategy. Yuki's silence balanced by Kwame's booming laughter. Sophia's knowledge woven into every shield and helm. Oaths were sworn beneath the rising moon. Hands clasped over the prow, each warrior binding their fate to the others. On the eve of their departure, the Jarl's hall was filled with feasting and farewells. Ragnhild stood, raising her horn. "We sail not for gold nor for glory, but to save the world from fire. Let the gods watch over us, and let our names be worthy of their halls." The crew echoed her words, their voices a single thunder. The Wyrm's tooth slid into the water, her dragon head gleaming in the dawn. The warband boarded, each taking their place, Ragnhild at the helm, Tormund at the prow, Grimnar and Kwame at the oars, Yuki and Sophia amidships. As the longship glided from the fjord, the old world fell away behind them. Ahead lay the open sea and the promise of battle. The warband was forged, their purpose clear as the northern stars. Ireland awaited, and with it, the next trial of fire. The Wyrm's tooth rode the whale road west, her oars biting the sea with the hunger of wolves. The wind filled her sail, and the warband's spirits rose with each league that fell behind them. Yet beneath the laughter and the songs, a tension. Coiled each warrior knew the fire they chased was no ordinary foe. The Irish coast loomed green and wild, the rivers running silver through the hills. They made landfall at Dublin, the Norsemen's Dublin, where the city's wooden palisades bristled with spears, and the air was thick with the cries of traders, slaves, and cattle. Here the world's edges met, Norse and Gael, Saxon and Dane, all jostling in the muddy streets. Ragnhild led her crew through the market, a codex fragment hidden beneath her cloak. The slave pens were a tangle of misery men and women from every corner of the isles, their eyes hollow, their bodies marked by the lash. Kwame moved among them, his stride easy, his gaze sharp. He slipped into the shadows, vanishing as only a man who had once been invisible could. Within the pens, Kwame found the truth. The rebellion was no wild spark, but a carefully tended flame. The Chain-Breakers, they called themselves, and their signs were everywhere scratched into the wood of the pens, woven into the braids of the slaves, whispered in the dark. They spoke of freedom, but their eyes burned with something fiercer, vengeance. A gaunt man pressed a scrap of parchment into Kwame's hand, his voice a rasp. The monastery at Clonmacnoise. They send the fire from there. The chain-breakers gather soon. All the isles will burn. Kwame nodded, his heart heavy. He saw the hope in the man's eyes, the desperate faith that he, too, was a brother in chains. But Kwame's path was not theirs. He slipped away, the coded message clenched in his fist. Meanwhile, Ragnhild and the others sought word of the monastery. Yuki moved like a shadow through the alleys, her senses attuned to every whisper. Safia bartered in the market, her tongue quick in a dozen languages, gathering rumors of strange weapons and southern gold. But the chain-breakers were watching. As dusk fell, the crew was ambushed in a narrow lane, the air thick with the stench of tallow and fear. Knives flashed in the gloom, and the warband was pressed back, outnumbered and hemmed in. Yuki vanished. Into the shadows, her blade a whisper of death. Safia hurled a clay pot, and fire blossomed in the darkness, scattering their foes. Grimnar's laughter rang out as he waded into the fray, his axe singing. Ragnhild fought at his side, her axes carving a path through the press. The battle was brutal and close, the kind of fight where every breath might be the last. Kwame arrived. In the nick of time, his great axe cleaving through the enemy's rear, turning the tide. The chain-breakers fell back, their leader cursing in a dozen tongues. When the dust settled, the crew gathered in a ruined tavern, licking their wounds. Kwame shared what he had learned. The monastery was not just a hiding place, but a hub center for the copying and distribution of the codex. The rebellion was no mere riot, but a network, its roots deep and its branches spreading. Ragnhild's jaw tightened. We strike at Clonmacnoise then. Cut the root, and the tree may yet fall. Kwame's eyes were troubled. They are not all monsters, these rebels. Some only want was stolen from them. Ragnhild placed a hand on his shoulder. We fight to save the world, not to keep it chained. But if we fail, there will be nothing left to save. The warband nodded, each feeling the weight of the task ahead. The city's lights flickered in the night, and the wind carried the distant sound of weeping. In Dublin, the line between order and chaos was thin as a blade's edge. The crew had seen the face of both, and knew the next battle would be fought not just with steel, but with the fate of the world in the balance. With the dawn, they set their course for Clonmacnoise, where fire and fate awaited. The Wyern's tooth slipped up the River Shannon beneath a sky heavy with rain, her hull cloaked in reeds and silence. The land here was old and green, the riverbanks thick with mist. At the heart of the boglands rose Clonmacnoise, its stone towers, and roundhouse walls bristling with new defenses shields lashed to parapets, fire lances jutting from every window, and the glint of watchful eyes above. Ragnhild gathered her warband in the shadow of the rushes, the codex fragments spread before them on a shield. We strike tonight, she said, her voice low. The chain-breakers hold the monks hostage and guard the codex. We must breach the walls, seize the book, and leave nothing for the fire to claim. Tormund studied the sky, his fingers tracing the wind's path. A fog will rise before dawn. I can guide us through it, unseen. Safia knelt beside him, mixing powders and oils. I can breach the wall with fire, but it will draw every. We must be swift. Grimnar grinned, his axe already red with anticipation. Let them come. I'll hold the breach until the world ends. Yuki's eyes flickered in the gloom. I will scale the walls and silence the fire crews. Number. Alarm will sound before we are inside. The plan was set. As the fog crept from the river, the warband moved shadows among shadows, their hearts beating with the rhythm of fate. Torment led them through the reeds, the mist swirling around their ankles. The monastery loomed above, its walls slick with rain. Sophia pressed a clay pot to the stone, her hands steady despite the tremor in her soul. With a whispered prayer, she lit the fuse. The explosion was a muffled roar, a blossom of fire and stone. Grimnar surged through the breach, his laughter echoing as he met the first defenders. The chain-breakers fought with the desperation of cornered wolves, their fire lances spitting death. But Grimnar was a storm, his axe carving a path through the chaos. Ragnhild and Yuki scaled the walls, their movements swift and silent. Yuki slipped through the shadows, her blade flashing as she dispatched the fire crews one by one. Ragnhild reached the parapet, her axes spinning, clearing the way for the others. Inside the scriptorium, the monks huddled in terror, the codex copy clutched by a rebel leader, a gaunt man with eyes like burning coals. He held the torch to the parchment, daring Ragnhild to come closer. Stay back, he snarled. One step, and the knowledge burns with me. Ragnhild's voice was cold as the northern sea. Better it burn than doom the world. The standoff broke in a flurry of motion. Yuki's blade flashed, the torch fell, and the codex was snatched from the flames. The rebel leader fell, his blood staining the stone, and the monks wept in relief. But the battle was not yet won. The chain-breakers rallied, pressing in from all sides. Sophia, her face streaked with soot, hurled another pot, the explosion, scattering the rebels. Grimnar held the breach, his body a wall of iron and will. Ragnhild looked at the codex, its pages filled with death. She made her choice. Burn the library. Leave nothing for them to reclaim. The monks wailed, but the warband moved with grim purpose. Flames rose, devouring centuries of knowledge history, poetry, law, and the cursed secrets of fire. The price of victory was bitter as ash. As dawn broke, the warband slipped away. The codex copy in hand, the monastery a pyre behind them. The river carried them north, the smoke trailing like a wound across the sky. Sophia sat in the prow, her eyes hollow. I have destroyed what I once loved. May the gods forgive me. Ragnhild placed a hand on her shoulder. You did what was needed. The world is safer, for now. But as they drifted downriver, a captured rebel, bound and bleeding, whispered a final warning. You are too late. Another shipment sent north, to the land of ice and fire. Iceland will rise, and the world will burn. The warband's hearts grew heavy. The fire was not quenched, only scattered. Their journey would lead them into the frozen north, where the next trial awaited. The price of knowledge was blood and flame, and the saga thundered on. The river bore them west, away from the smoldering ruin of Clonmacnoise, and the Worm's Tooth found the open sea once more. The warband's faces were drawn, their eyes haunted by the memory of burning parchment and the wails of monks. The codex copy, now sealed in a leaden chest, weighed heavier than any gold. Their course bent north, but the ship's timbers groaned for repair, and the crew's spirits for guidance. So they made for the Hebrides, where the old gods still whispered. In the wind, and the veil between worlds was thin as mist. They landed at a lonely settlement, its turf-roofed halls crouched against the wind. Here, the folk still honored the Volva, the seeress, keeper of the old ways. Ragnhild led her crew to the longhouse where the Volva dwelled, her presence a hush upon the hearth. The seeress was ancient, her hair white as sea foam, her eyes clouded yet piercing. She welcomed them with a nod, her voice a rasp like wind through reeds. You come burdened with fire and fate. Sit and let the threads be seen. The warband gathered around the hearth. The Volva cast bones and runes, her hands moving in patterns older than kings. She breathed deep, her body swaying as the spirit took her. Her voice changed, echoing with something vast and cold. A serpent from the gilded cage weaves the world's undoing. A ghost of the rising sun walks the path of shadow and honor. A man of chains will break the greatest chain of all. A storm rider's choice will calm the sea or drown the world. Fire and ice will meet, and the shield wall will break. One will find glory where death and flame entwine. One will vanish, yet remain. One will choose, and the world will turn anew. The trance broke. The Volva slumped, sweat beading her brow. Ragnhild pressed for meaning, but the seeress only shook her head. The threads are tangled. You must walk them to their end. Grimnar's eyes shone with wild joy. Glory in fire and ice my death then. I welcome it. Yuki's gaze was distant, the words ghost of the rising sun echoing in her heart. She felt the weight of her exile, the shadow of her past, in a strange sense of purpose. Kwame sat in silence, the prophecy of the man of chains gnawing at him. Was the chain to be broken the rebellion, or something deeper his own fear, his own doubt? Sophia listened, her hands trembling. The serpent from the gilded cage, she knew it could only mean a mind as cunning as any in Byzantium. Her past was not done with her yet. Tormund, ever the watcher of skies, pondered the storm riders. Choice. He felt the burden of fate settle on his shoulders, as heavy as the sea. The warband left the longhouse in silence, the wind keening through the stones. That night, as they repaired the Wyrm's tooth and readied her for the northern crossing, each warrior turned the prophecy over in their mind, seeking comfort or warning in its riddles. When dawn came, the ship was whole, the crew bound tighter by shared fate. The Volva watched from the shore, her staff raised in blessing or warning, none could say. The Wyrm's tooth turned her prow to the north, toward Iceland's frozen wastes where fire and ice would meet, and the next chapter of their saga would be written in blood and storm. The Wyrm's tooth sailed north into the teeth of the world, her dragon prow cleaving the gray waves as the sky darkened and the wind howled. The North Atlantic was no friend to mortals here. The sea was a living thing, ancient and hungry. And the gods watched with cold amusement. Tormund stood at the prow, his eyes narrowed against the salt spray, reading the sky and the shifting moods of the water. A storm comes, he warned, and with it the sea's true test. Trust the ship, trust each other, and we may yet see Iceland's shore. The crew lashed down every line, their hands numb with cold, their faces set with grim resolve. Ragnhild moved among them, her voice steady, her presence a bulwark against fear. We have faced fire and steel, she reminded them, but the sea is the oldest foe. Hold fast, and let no man or woman falter. The storm struck with the fury of a god's wrath. Waves rose like mountains, crashing over the deck, tearing at the oars. The wind screamed, and the sky vanished in a shroud of mist and sleet. The Wyrm's tooth groaned, her timbers straining, but Tormund's hands on the tiller were sure, his voice a song to the sea. For 3 days and nights they battled the storm. Yuki moved like a wraith, securing lines, her small frame nimble where others faltered. Grimnar laughed into the gale, daring the gods to take him. Kwame's great strength steadied the mast when it threatened to snap, his voice booming encouragement to the oarsmen. Safiya, pale and shivering, tended the wounded and whispered prayers in a tongue none but she understood. On the second night, a shadow appeared on the horizon, a longship, its sail marked with a serpent's eye. Sigurd Snake-Eye, a rival captain, had followed them from Norway, drawn by rumors of the codex and the promise of power. His ship stalked them through the storm, waiting for the moment to strike. Tormund's eyes flashed. He thinks to catch us when we are weakest. But the sea is my ally, not his. With a cunning born of years on the whale road, Tormund guided the Wyrm's tooth through a maze of icebergs and hidden shoals. The rival ship followed, but the sea showed no mercy to the unwary. A great berk loomed from the mist, and with a thunderous crack, Sigurd's ship was caught and splintered, her crew's cries lost in the storm. The Wyrm's tooth limped onward, battered but unbroken. The crew worked through the night, patching the hull with tar and prayer, their trust in each other forged anew by hardship. When at last the storm broke, the sky was a pale blue, and the mountains of Iceland rose from the sea like the bones of the world. The warband gazed upon the land of fire and ice, their hearts filled with awe and dread. Tormund, exhausted but triumphant, turned to Ragnhild. "We are here, Captain. The gods have tested us, and we have not been found wanting." Ragnhild clasped his shoulder, her eyes shining. "You have steered us through death's jaws, wave dancer. The Saga will remember your name." The Wyrm's tooth glided into a narrow fjord, the water calm at last. The crew disembarked, their bodies weary, their spirits sharpened. The ordeal at sea had bound them as shield siblings, each knowing the worth of the others in the face of the world's fury. But Iceland was no safe haven. The land itself smoked and hissed, and somewhere in its wild heart, the fire of rebellion waited. The warband gathered their gear, the codex copy secure, and set their eyes on the volcanic wastes where their next trial would begin. The sea had tested them, and they had endured. Now, the land of ice and fire would demand its own price. Iceland's land was a riddle of fire and frost-black volcanic fields veined with ice, steam rising from hidden vents, the air sharp with the tongue of sulfur. The Wyrm's tooth lay anchored in a sheltered cove, her hull still bearing the scars of the storm. The warband moved inland, following the trail of the codex through a landscape as raw and untamed as the gods themselves. Their guide was a captured rebel, sullen and silent, but fear loosened his tongue when Ragnhild's axe pressed against his throat. "The chain-breakers gather in the shadow of the great volcano," he spat. "They wait for the signal to bring the fire to the Althing. You are too late." Ragnhild's eyes were cold as glacier ice. "We shall see." They pressed on, the ground crunching beneath their boots, the sky a vault of iron. The path led them into a narrow canyon, its walls slick with frozen mist, the air eerily still. Tormund frowned, reading the wind. Something is wrong. The land is too quiet. The ambush came swift as a wolf's bite. A thunderous crack split the air rebels atop the cliffs, had triggered an avalanche, sending a torrent of ice and stone crashing down. The warband scattered, separated by the roaring white. Ragnhild and Sophia tumbled into a hollow. Yuki vanished. Into the steam, Grimnar and Kwame found themselves at the mouth of a narrow pass, cut off from the others. Rebel war cries echoed through the canyon. Kwame planted his feet, his great axe ready. "Hold the line." He roared, and Grimnar answered with a howl, his eyes alight with the promise of battle. The rebels came in waves, their weapons crude, but their fury terrible. Kwame's timber fall shattered shields and bone, his every blow a promise kept to his shield siblings. Grimnar spun through the press, his blood tornado a storm of death, laughter ringing as he fought for the glorious. And the seeress had foretold. Elsewhere, Yuki moved like a ghost among the rocks, her form flickering in and out of the steam. She struck from the shadows, her blade silent, her presence felt only in the sudden collapse of centuries. She used the land itself's steam vents to blind, icy stones to trip, her every movement a dance of death and honor. Ragnhild and Sophia, pinned by falling debris, worked together. Sophia, her mind racing, found a vein of sulfur, and with trembling hands mixed a quick burning powder. Ragnhild shielded her as she set the charge, the explosion sending a plume of toxic smoke billowing through the canyon. Tormund, separated but not lost, climbed to a high ridge, reading the wind's secrets. He called down a sudden gust, driving the sulphurous smoke into the heart of the rebel force, sowing confusion and panic. The rebels, blinded and choking, stumbled into the narrow pass straight into the waiting axes of Grimnar and Kwame. The two warriors fought back to back, their strength and fury unbreakable. The ground ran red, and the rebels broke, fleeing into the wastes. When the smoke cleared, the warband reunited amid the shattered ice and glassy black rock. Kwame, bloodied but unbowed, looked to his friends and felt a new strength. He had chosen to be their shield, not just their weapon. Grimnar, breathing hard, stared at the field of death and felt a strange emptiness. He had sought his glorious end, but fate had denied him. He was alive, and the meaning of that survival gnawed at his soul. Their captured rebel leader, cornered and trembling, revealed the next piece of the puzzle. The codex copies, they are to be presented at the Althing. The chieftains will be shown the power of fire, and a new republic will be born. You cannot stop it. Ragnhild's jaw tightened. We will see what the law thing decides when the truth is laid bare. The warband bound their wounds and pressed on, the path now clear. The Althing awaited, the oldest parliament in the world, where the fate of Iceland, and perhaps the North itself, would be decided. The shield wall had held, but the Saga storm was only gathering. The warband's journey led them to Lingvalar, where the land split open and the earth's bones showed through. Here, beneath the shadow of the mountains and the endless sky, the Althing gathered a sea of tents and banners, chieftains and free men, the voices of Iceland rising in debate and judgment. The Worm's tooth lay hidden in a reed-choked inlet, her crew moving among the throngs as strangers in a strange land. Ragnhild wore her finest cloak, axes at her belt, her bearing that of a captain and a daughter of Jarls. Kwame walked at her side, his presence a silent challenge to every man who looked upon him and saw only a thrall. Yuki and Sophia moved through the crowd, ears open for whispers of rebellion, eyes sharp for the glint of hidden weapons. The Althing was in turmoil. Word of the chain-breakers had spread, and the chieftains argued, some for tradition, others for change. The rebels' agents moved among the people, promising freedom and fire, their words kindling hope and fear. In equal measure, Ragnhild stood before the law rock, her voice ringing out across the assembly. I bring warning from the east and the south. The fire you are promised is not freedom, but ruin. The codex is a serpent's gift, its knowledge will burn not just your chains, but your homes, your kin, your very world. A murmur ran through the crowd. The rebel leader, gaunt and fierce, stepped forward, the codex copy held high. We seek only what is ours by right, the power to break the yoke, to make all men free. Kwame stepped forward, his voice deep and steady. I was a thrall. I know the taste of the lash, the weight of the chain. But freedom bought with fire and slaughter is no freedom at all. I chose honor over vengeance. I stand with those who would build, not burn. His words struck like a hammer. The chieftains listened, torn between fear and hope, tradition and the promise of a new world. The debate raged, words as sharp as any blade. Ragnhild spoke of order, of the old ways that had kept the peace. Kwame spoke of change, but not at the cost of their souls. Sophia, her voice trembling, told of cities turned to ash of knowledge. That could not be unlearned. Then, in the midst of the uproar, a new voice cut through the din. Sigurd Snake-Eye strode into the circle, his serpent-emblazoned cloak billowing. These are not saviors, but warmongers. They seek to hoard the fire for their own jarl, to rule you with fear and flame. The crowd turned, suspicion flaring. Ragnhild met Sigurd's gaze, her jaw set. You know nothing of our purpose, Snake-Eye. You would see the world burn for your own gain. Sigurd smiled, cold and sly. Then let the law decide. Let the Althing judge who speaks for Iceland. The assembly fell silent. The law speaker, ancient and wise, rose and spoke. Let the codex be outlawed. Let no man possess its secrets, nor spread its fire. Let those who would break this law be cast out, their names struck from the sagas. A cheer rose from the crowd, relief and fear mingling. The chain-breaker's dream was broken, but not destroyed. In the confusion, Sigurd slipped away, the codex copy clutched in his hand. Ragnhild saw him flee, her heart pounding. He has the book. He means to spread the fire beyond these shores. The warband gave chase, their feet pounding the earth. But Sigurd was swift, his men waiting with horses at the edge of the plain. He vanished into the wild, the codex lost once more. Ragnhild stood at the edge of the world, the wind cold on her face. The law had spoken, but the fire still burned. The hunt was not over. The warband gathered, their resolve hardened. The chase would lead them across the sea, to the Danelaw, and beyond. The fate of the North still hung in the balance, and the Saga thundered on. The Wyrm's Tooth sailed east, her prow slicing the gray waves as the warband gave chase to Sigurd's Snake-Eye. The codex was in his grasp, and with it, the power to set the world aflame. Their course led them to the Danelaw, where Norse and Saxon lived in uneasy truce, and the city of Jorvik rose from the mists, a jewel of trade and ambition. its streets teeming with the restless and the bold. The rivers of England were Sigurd's chosen road. He had allied himself with an exiled Saxon lord, a man hungry to drive the Norse from his homeland. Together, they commanded a fleet of shallow-draft ships, ghosting through the estuaries and marshes, striking swift and vanishing before pursuit. Ragnhild stood at the helm, her eyes narrowed against the morning sun. He is a serpent, this Sigurd slippery and cunning. But every serpent must come to ground. Tormund studied the tides, his mind working through the labyrinth of rivers, and reads, "He cannot outrun us forever. The sea is open, but the rivers are a trap for those who do not know their moods." The warband moved with purpose, gathering allies among the Norse of Jorvik men and women who remembered Ragnhild's father, who owed debts of blood and honor. They learned of Sigurd's movements, his raids on Saxon villages, his promises of fire and freedom to any who would follow. The final confrontation came in a fog-shrouded estuary, where the river met the sea in a maze of mud and water. Tormund guided the Worm's Tooth through the hidden channels, his hands sure on the tiller, his eyes reading the currents as a skald reads runes. The ghost fleet appeared from the mist, Sigurd's serpent banners snapping in the wind. The battle was joined ships ramming, axes flashing, arrows hissing through the fog. Ragnhild led the charge, her axes singing, her war cry echoing across the water. Kwame fought at her side, his great axe cleaving through shield and bone. Yuki moved like a shadow, slipping from ship to ship, her blade finding the weak points in the enemy's line. Grimnar's laughter rang out as he leapt from deck to deck, his fury a storm none could withstand. Saphia, crouched behind the mast, hurled fire pots at the enemy's stores of Greek fire, turning their own weapons against them. Tormund, atop the prow, hurled harpoons with deadly aim, pinning enemy ships in place as the tide turned against them. The battle raged, the fog thick with the screams of the dying and the roar of burning ships. At last, Ragnhild found herself face to face with Sigurd on the deck of his burning longship. The two captains circled, axes raised, the flames licking at their feet. Sigurd struck first, his blade quick and cruel, but Ragnhild was swifter. She parried, countered, and drove him back, her every move a lesson in the old ways. "You fight for nothing but yourself, Snake Eye," she spat. "You are no Drengr, no true Viking." Sigurd sneered, but his strength was failing. With a final cry, Ragnhild struck him down, her axe biting deep. The codex fell from his grasp, tumbling to the deck as the ship groaned and split beneath them. Ragnhild seized the book and leapt to the Worm's Tooth, the flames closing behind her. The ghost fleet was broken, the Saxon lord slain, the river running red with the price of ambition. Tormund guided them back to open water, the codex copy safe once more. In Sigurd's cabin, they found a letter orders for the next shipment. Bound for Hidibi, the greatest trading hub of the Baltic. There, hundreds of copies awaited, ready to spread the fire to every corner of the north. Ragnhild's jaw tightened. The serpent's head is cut, but the body still writhes. To Hidibi. Then, the saga is not yet done. The warband set their course, the wind at their backs, the fate of the world still hanging by a thread. The Baltic wind carried the Worm's Tooth to Hidibi, where the world's riches gathered and the tongues of a dozen lands mingled in the market's roar. The city's walls were thick with watchmen, its harbors choked with ships from Russ, Franklin. and the farthest reaches of the north. Here, gold and secrets changed hands with equal ease, and the ambitions of men grew as wild as the sea. Ragnhild led her warband through the throng, the codex copy hidden beneath her cloak. They sought the hall of Jarl Eirik, an old ally of her father's, whose word carried weight from the fjords to the steppes. The Jarl welcomed them with open arms, his hall bright with laughter and the scent of roasting boar. Ragnhild Storm-Rider. Eirik boomed, clasping her forearm. Your father's blood runs strong. What brings you to Hidibi with such a storm at your back? Ragnhild spoke plainly, for the hour was late and the stakes high. She told of the codex, the uprisings, the fire that threatened to consume the north. Eirik listened, his eyes sharp, his smile never faltering. You seek the shipment, then? He said at last. You are not the only ones. Word of this fire has reached every corner of the world. But you have my men, my ships, my oath. We will find the codex and see it destroyed. Relief flickered in Ragnhild's heart, but Yuki's eyes never left the shadows at the edge of the hall. Safiya, too, watched the Jarl's every move, her scholar's mind weighing every word. That night, as the warband rested, the trap was sprung. Armed men poured into their chambers, blades drawn, faces masked. Ragnhild fought like a cornered wolf, but the numbers were too great. Grimnar was struck from behind, Quain's axe wrenched from his grasp, Yuki pinned by nets, Safiya dragged away by men in foreign mail. Jarl Eirik entered, his smile now a serpent's sneer. You are too dangerous, Storm-Rider. The world is changing, and I will not be left behind. The serpent of Byzantium has promised me a kingdom of my own if I deliver him the fire. You and your crew will vanish, and your names will be forgotten. Ragnhild spat at his feet, her eyes blazing. You betray your own blood, your own gods. The fire will consume you, as it will all who think to master it. Eirik only laughed. Perhaps. But I will die a king, not a beggar. The warband was separated, stripped of weapons and hope. Ragnhild was thrown into a dark cell, her wrists bound, her heart heavy with rage and shame. Grimnar and Kwame were shackled in the slave pens, their strength useless against iron bars. Yuki was locked in a silent chamber, her every move watched. Safiya was taken to the Jarl's scholars, her knowledge to be wrung from her by threat or pain. In the darkness, each warrior faced their own despair. Ragnhild cursed herself for trusting old oaths. Grimnar raged against his chains, his spirit battered but unbroken. Kwame stared at the other slaves, their eyes full of fear and hope, and remembered the prophecy. A man of chains will break the greatest chain of all. Yuki stilled her breath, listening for the faintest sound, her mind already working at the locks. Safiya, alone and afraid, clung to the memory of her purpose. Knowledge must not be the world's undoing. Above them, the city bustled, unaware that the fate of the north hung by a thread. The Jarl's ships, loaded with codex copies, prepared to sail at dawn, their holds full of fire and doom. In the darkness, the warband's unity was tested as never before. The Saga had reached its nadir, the hour of betrayal and despair. Yet even in the deepest night, the old gods watched, and the thread of fate was not yet cut. Night pressed heavy on Hidibi, the city's torches flickering in the wind as the warband languished in their separate prisons. Yet the bonds of oaths and fate are not so easily broken, and in the darkness, each warrior's spirit kindled anew. In the slave pens, Kwame sat among the chained and the hopeless. The guards jeered, but he met their eyes with the calm of a man who had already broken his own shackles. Quietly, he spoke to the other thralls, his words a spark in the gloom. "Tonight, we are not slaves. Tonight, we are brothers and sisters. When the time comes, follow me, and we will taste freedom." He watched the guards, learned their patterns, and waited. Elsewhere, Yuki lay in her silent cell, her mind as sharp as the blade they had taken from her. She listened to the footsteps, the scrape of keys, the rhythm of the guards' rounds. When the moment came, a guard pausing too long at her door, she struck, swift and silent, using the very chains meant to bind her. The man fell without a sound, and Yuki slipped into the shadows, a ghost in the heart of the enemy's stronghold. Safiya, held in a chamber thick with the scent of ink and fear, faced the Jarl's scholars. They demanded secrets, threatened pain, but she feigned ignorance, her mind racing. When they left her alone, she worked quickly, mixing the dregs of their lamp oil and her own tears into a volatile brew. She set it by the door, a trap for the next who entered. Grimnar and Ragnhild, each in their own cell, waited for a sign. It came as a whisper in the dark, Yuki's hand at the lock, her eyes shining with purpose. "Come, the way is open." The warband reunited in the twisting corridors, their joy fierce and silent. Yuki led them through the maze, her memory flawless, her steps sure. They found Kwame at the slave pens, already in the midst of a riot chains broken. Guards overwhelmed, the thralls surging like a tide. Kwame's axe was in his hands once more, and his laughter rang out as he led the charge. Safiya's trap exploded in a flash of fire and smoke, sowing chaos among the Jarl's men. The warband fought their way through the city, every step a battle, every breath a prayer. Grimnar held the narrow bridge to the docks, his axe a wall of death, buying precious moments for the others to reach the Wyrm's tooth. Ragnhild, battered but unbowed, led her crew aboard their ship, her voice cutting through the din. "Cast off to the sea." The Wyrm's tooth slipped from the burning docks, arrows hissing overhead, the city's alarm bells tolling doom. Behind them, the Jarl's ships laden with codex copies were already leaving the harbor, their sails black against the dawn. On the deck, the warband gathered, bloodied and breathless. They had escaped the gilded cage, but the enemy's fleet was loose upon the world. Ragnhild stared at the burning city, her jaw set. "We have failed to stop the fire, but we are not yet beaten. We will make our stand at the harbor's mouth. If we cannot save the world, we will make the enemy pay dearly for every league they sail." The crew readied themselves, their unity forged anew in the crucible of betrayal and escape. The Saga thundered on, the storm gathering for its fiercest blow. The dawn over Hidibi was blood-red, the sky streaked with smoke as the Jarl's fleet, heavy with codex copies, made for the open sea. The Wyrm's tooth, battered but unbroken, slipped through the chaos of the harbor, her crew grim and resolute. Ragnhild stood at the prow, her eyes fixed on the enemy ships, her heart a storm of fury and purpose. Tormund's voice rose above the din. "A squall comes from the east. I can call it down, but it will strike friend and foe alike." Ragnhild nodded, her jaw set. "Do it. We cannot let those ships escape." "Safiya, are you ready?" Safiya's hands trembled as she uncorked her last, most potent firepots. the air around her thick with the scent of pitch and saltpeter. I am ready. The gods forgive me for what I must do. The wind began to howl, the sea churning as Tormund called upon every trick and prayer he knew. Lightning forked across the sky, thunder rolling over the water. The Jarl's fleet faltered, ships colliding as the storm struck, their sails torn, their oarsmen blinded by rain and spray. The Wyrm's tooth darted among them, a serpent in the maelstrom. Ragnhild led the boarding parties, axes flashing as they leapt from deck to deck, cutting down any who stood in their way. Kwame fought. At her side, his great axe cleaving through shields and flesh, his voice a roar above the storm. Saphia hurled her firepots into the holds of the lead ships, the explosions blooming like hellflowers. Greek fire spilled across the decks, igniting barrels and sails, the flames leaping from ship to ship. The harbor became a vision of Ragnarok wood and flesh alike, consumed by unquenchable fire. Yuki moved through the chaos like a wraith, her blade finding the captains and helmsmen, sowing confusion and panic. Grimnar, his laughter wild, fought atop a burning mast, his axe a beacon in the inferno. The enemy fleet broke, ships sinking, or running aground, their precious cargo lost to the flames. The water itself burned, slick with oil and fire, the screams of the dying lost in the thunder and the crash of waves. Ragnhild and Kwame fought back to back on a splintered dock, the heat blistering their skin, the world reduced to smoke and blood. At last, the Jarl's flagship exploded in a tower of fire, the shockwave hurling them into the sea. The Wyrms, tooth scorched but afloat, gathered the survivors. Saphia wept as she watched the city burn, her knowledge unleashed in a storm of death. I have become what I most feared, she whispered, a bringer of ruin. Ragnhild placed a hand on her shoulder, her own heart heavy. You did what was needed. The fire is stopped for now. In the wreckage, they found the dying Jarl, his body broken, his eyes wild with pain and regret. He gasped a name Callistos, the serpent of Byzantium, the true architect of the codex's spread, a general exiled from his homeland, now hidden in a fortress far to the south. The warband stood amid the ashes, the cost of their victory etched into their souls. Hidibi was a ruin, the codex copies destroyed, but the knowledge had already seeped into the world. The North would never be the same. Ragnhild looked to her crew, their faces marked by loss and resolve. We sail for the south. The serpent's head must be cut, or the fire will rise again. The Saga pressed onward, the storm's fury spent, but its shadow long. The warband turned their prow toward the unknown, the fate of the world still hanging by a thread of steel and will. The Wyrm's tooth limped from the ruins of Hidibi, her hull scorched, her crew battered but unbroken. The Baltic lay behind them, a graveyard of ships and dreams. Ahead stretched the long, perilous road to the south, the sunken rivers and overland, portages that would carry them from the cold north to the heart of the world. Miklagard, the fabled Constantinople. The journey was a saga in itself. They rowed up winding rivers, their oars biting into black water beneath the shadow of ancient forests. At the portages, they hauled the Wyrm's tooth overland on greased logs, their backs aching, their hands raw. They traded with Slavs and Finns, bartered with wary Franks, and fought off bandits who saw only a battered ship and weary travelers. Saphia became their guide and their shield. In the towns of the south, Her tongue unlocked doors and loosened secrets. She taught the crew the customs of the road, how to bow to a Greek priest, how to haggle with a Jewish merchant, how to spot the signs of a Byzantine patrol. Her knowledge was their compass, her presence their passport. Yet the journey was not without peril. More than once, they glimpsed the banners of the Empire Golden Eagles on fields of purple patrolling the riverbanks, searching for the outlaws who had stolen the North's most dangerous secret. The warband moved like shadows, hiding by day, traveling by night, their trust in each other, their only certainty. Tormund, so at home on the open sea, found the river strange and confining. Yet he learned to read their moods, to sense the coming of fog or flood, to guide the Wyrm's tooth through reed-choked channels and treacherous shoals. The river is a serpent, he said, but even a serpent can be tamed by a clever hand. Ragnhild watched her crew adapt, their Norse pride tempered by necessity. They were no longer raiders, but fugitive strangers in a world that saw them as barbarians. Yet their purpose burned brighter than ever. The codex must be destroyed. At its source, or all their sacrifices would be for nothing. Kwame, seeing the cities of the south, felt his heart twist. Here, too, men were bought and sold, their chains hidden beneath silks and gold. He saw the same hunger in the eyes of slaves and lords alike, and knew that the world's chains were not so easily broken. Yuki moved through the foreign crowds with silent grace, her eyes ever watchful. She learned the patterns of the city. Guards, the secret signs of the underworld, the ways to vanish in a place where every face was strange. Grimnar, restless and caged, found solace in the company of his shield siblings. He told tales of the North by the fire, his laughter a reminder that even in exile, the old ways endured. At last, after weeks of hardship and danger, the towers of Constantinople rose before them, white marble and golden domes gleaming in the sun, the city's walls stretching from sea to sea. The Wyrm's tooth, battered but proud, slipped into the shadow of the world's greatest city. Safiya stood at the prow, her face a mask of fear and longing. "This is where it began," she whispered, "and where it must end." Ragnhild placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice steady. "We are with you. Whatever awaits, we face it together." The warband prepared to enter the gilded cage of Miklagard, their hearts steeled for the final trial. The serpent's lair awaited, and with it, the fate of the world. The Wyrm's tooth lay hidden among the forest of masts in the Golden Horn, her battered hull lost amid the splendor of Miklagard. The city was a marvel, its walls higher than any in the north, its streets alive with the colors and scents of 100 nations. Marble palaces gleamed in the sun, and the great dome of Hagia Sophia soared above all, a mountain of stone and gold. Yet beneath the beauty, danger coiled. The warband moved through the city as shadows, their Norse faces drawing wary glances. Safiya led them through the labyrinth of alleys and markets, her knowledge of the city their only shield. She wore the plain robes of a merchant's daughter, her eyes never still. They sought the Varangian Guard, the Emperor's axe-wielding mercenaries, men of the north, now sworn to the Roman throne. Safiya's old contacts, forged in the days before her exile, proved true. In a smoky tavern near the Blashernai Palace, they met Bjorn the Tall, a bear of a man whose laughter shook the rafters. "Safiya," he roared, crushing her in a hug. "I thought you dead, or worse, married to a Greek." His eyes narrowed as he saw her companions. "You bring trouble." "I see." She told him of Callistos, the codex, and the fire that threatened to consume the world. Bjorn listened, his face grave. Callistos is no friend to the guard. He hides in a fortress on a sea stack, south in the Aegean. Few know its name, fewer. Its secrets, but I can get you a map and a warning. The city is full of spies. Trust no one. While Bjorn gathered information, the warband moved like ghosts. Yuki's skills were never more vital. She slipped through the city's underbelly, eavesdropping on merchants and priests, bribing beggars, and vanishing before the city watch could catch her scent. She learned of Callistos' agents, men who watched the harbors and the foreign quarters, always searching for strangers with northern eyes. Sophia, her heart pounding, sought out her old mentor, Theodora, now a high official in the imperial court. Their meeting was tense, a dance of veiled threats and old affection. Theodora, moved by Sophia's desperation, revealed the final piece. Callistos' fortress was once a Roman signal tower, now bristling with new engines of war, and guarded by mercenaries from every corner of the empire. Meanwhile, Kwame walked the city's slave markets, his heart heavy. He saw the same chains he had worn, the same hopelessness in the eyes of men and women from every land. He realized that even in the world's greatest city, freedom was a rare and precious thing. The codex, in the wrong hands, would only forge new chains from the ashes of the old. Ragnhild gathered her crew in a quiet courtyard, the city's noise a distant murmur. We have what we need. The serpent's lair is found. We go south, and we end this one way or another. Sophia nodded, her resolve hard as steel. I will see this finished. For my homeland and for all the worlds our fire could burn. The warband slipped from the city at dawn, their faces set, their hearts united. The journey had stripped them of all but each other, their weapons, their wits, and their oaths. They sailed into the Aegean, the sun rising behind them, the shadow of Callistos' fortress looming ahead. The gilded cage of Miklagard faded behind them, but its lessons would not be forgotten. Civilization, they had learned, was a mask beneath it, the same hunger, the same fear, the same hope for something better. The final trial awaited, and the saga thundered toward its end. The Aegean shimmered beneath a sky of hammered bronze as the worm's tooth slipped through hidden channels, guided by Sophia's memory and Bjorn's stolen map. The sea-stack fortress of Callistos rose from the waves like a dragon's tooth shear. Cliffs crowned with black stone, banners snapping in the salt wind, the smoke of forges curling into the sky. Here, the codex had been born, and here, the warband would see it ended. They anchored on a deserted islet, the fortress looming across a churning strait. The night before the assault, the crew gathered around a driftwood fire, the flames painting their faces with gold and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of brine and fate. Ragnhild spoke first, her voice steady as the tide. We have come farther than any skald could dream. We have lost much, and more may yet be taken. But we are shield siblings, bound by blood and oath. Tomorrow we end the serpent's work, die as legends. Grimnar sat sharpening his axe, the edge gleaming. I have sought a glorious death since the day I first lifted steel, but tonight I find I want something more. I want to see you all live. If I fall, let it be for you. Kwame gazed into the fire, his hands wrapped around his axe haft. I was born in chains. I broke them, but the world forges new ones every day. Tomorrow, I break the last chain mine and all others. Not for vengeance, but for freedom. Yuki and Sophia worked side by side, crafting smoke bombs and climbing hooks, their hands moving in silent harmony. Yuki's eyes met Sophia's, and she spoke softly. The ghost of the rising sun walks with honor, not shadow. I am not what I was, I am what I choose to be. Tomorrow, I fight for my family. Sophia's voice was quiet, but fierce. I have run from my past long enough. I will face Callistos, and I will see the codex destroyed. Knowledge is a weapon, but it is also a burden. One chooses to lay it down. Tormund watched the sky, reading the clouds and the wind. A storm gathers. I can call it to cover our approach, but it will be wild. Trust me, as you have before. The sea and sky are with us. They sat in silence, the fire crackling, each lost in their own thoughts. The Viviva's prophecy echoed in their hearts: serpents, ghosts, chains, and storms. They were no longer the people who had set out from Norway. They were more and less. They were a family forged in fire. As the moon rose, Ragnhild stood and raised her horn. To the last of the old ways and the first of the new. Let the gods remember us, whatever comes. The crew drank, their voices rising in a song that carried across the water, defiant and proud. When dawn came, the warband donned their armor, checked their weapons, and prepared for the final assault. The storm Tormund had promised gathered on the horizon, thunder rumbling like the drums of war. The time for words was past. The Shield brothers and sisters stood together, ready to meet their word. The fortress awaited, and with it, the end of the saga. The storm broke as the warband launched their assault. The sky split by lightning, the sea whipped to fury. Tormund steered the Wyrm's tooth through the boiling waves, his hands sure on the tiller, his voice raised in a song to the storm gods. Rain lashed the deck, thunder rolled, and the fortress loomed above, black crown on a pillar of stone, its walls bristling with engines of war. The defenders were ready. Catapults hurled stones and fire. Ballistae spat iron bolts into the churning sea. But the storm was their ally, masking their approach, scattering the aim of the garrison. The Wyrm's tooth rode the whirlpools at the base of the sea stack, Tormund guiding her with uncanny skill, until the warband leapt from her deck onto the slick rocks below. The climb was a battle in itself. Arrows rained down, rocks tumbled from above, and boiling oil hissed in the storm. Sophia led the way, her hands steady as she set charges in the ancient stone, blasting handholds and sowing confusion among the defenders. Yuki moved like a shadow, scaling the cliff with silent grace, her blade flashing as she dispatched sentries before they could raise the alarm. Grimnar and Kwame climbed side by side, their strength and fury carving a path upward. Grimnar's laughter echoed even in the storm, his axe biting into stone and flesh alike. Kwame's great hands hauled his shield siblings up, his resolve unbreakable. Ragnhild was everywhere shouting orders, lending a hand, her axes ready for the first breach. The warband moved as one, each trusting the others with their lives. At the top, the defenders rallied, forming a shield wall at the fortress gate. Grimnar surged forward, his rage focused and pure, holding the line against a tide of mercenaries. He fought not for glory, but for his family, his every blow a promise kept. Yuki slipped through the chaos, her blade finding the crew's manning. The Greek fire engines. She moved unseen, her strikes precise, her presence a terror in the storm. Sophia, her face streaked with rain and soot, turned the defenders' own fire lances against them, her knowledge now a weapon for justice. She set the fortress's stores of Greek fire to explode, sowing panic and breaking the defenders' will. Tormund, below on the Wyrm's tooth, called down the storm's fury. Lightning struck the main watchtower, shattering stone and sending defenders fleeing. The path to the heart of the fortress was open. The warband pressed forward, battered but unbroken. The climb had been a journey through hell itself, but they had emerged stronger, their purpose clear. Inside the fortress, the halls were a maze of stone and shadow, the air thick with the scent of oil and fear. The final battle awaited in the scriptorium at the tower's peak, where Callistos, the serpent of Byzantium, waited with the master codex. The warband gathered their strength, their eyes meeting in silent oath. The time had come to end the serpent's reign, or die in the attempt. The storm raged outside, but within, the true tempest was about to begin. The fortress's halls echoed with the clash of steel and the roar of fire as the warband surged through its heart. Grimnar led the charge at the main gate, his axe a whirlwind of death, his laughter ringing above the din. Mercenaries from every corner of the world pressed in, but Grimnar stood alone in the breach, a shield wall of one. He fought not with berserker madness, but with a joy born of purpose, each blow a gift to his shield siblings, each wound a badge of honor. Valhalla watches, he bellowed, holding the line as the others slipped past, his body a bulwark against the tide. The prophecy of the Volva burned in his mind, glory where fire meets ice. Here, in the storm-lashed fortress, he found it. At last, Yuki moved through the ramparts like a phantom, her feet silent on the wet stone. She dispatched the Greek fire crews with swift, precise strikes, her blade flashing in the gloom. Smoke bombs blossomed in her wake, sowing confusion and terror. She was the ghost of the rising sun, her honor now a shield for her new family. Sophia, her heart pounding, reached the armory where the fire lance mechanisms were stored. She worked quickly, her hands sure as she sabotaged the engines, turning their deadly power against the defenders. Flames erupted in the corridors, blocking pursuit and scattering the mercenaries. The knowledge she had once feared was now her weapon for justice. Tormund, below on the Wyrm's tooth, watched the storm's fury build. He waited for the signal, a flash of fire from the tower, and then hurled his harpoon, wrapped in copper wire, into the heart of the fortress. Lightning struck, shattering the main watchtower in a blinding explosion. Stone rained down, and the defenders broke, their courage lost in the face of the god's wrath. Ragnhild and Kwame pressed on, climbing the spiral stairs to the scriptorium at the tower's peak. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of burning parchment. At the top, they found Callistos, the serpent of Byzantium, waiting beside the master codex. Grimnar, battered and bleeding, held the gate below, his strength failing but his spirit unbroken. As the last of the mercenaries surged forward, he met them with a final defiant roar. For the shield wall, for the Saga, he fell beneath. A storm of blades, his death a song of glory that echoed through the halls. Above, the warband felt the loss like a blow, but there was no time for grief. The path to the heart of the fortress was clear, but the cost had been dear. The scriptorium awaited, the codex gleaming in the firelight, and the final confrontation was at hand. The saga thundered on, the storm's fury now matched by the fire within. The scriptorium at the tower's peak was a chamber of shadows and flame. Shelves of ancient scrolls and forbidden tomes lined the walls, their secrets flickering in the firelight. At its heart stood Callistos, the serpent of Byzantium, his armor black and gold, his eyes cold as the marble of his homeland. The master codex lay open on a pedestal, its pages aglow with the promise and threat of a new world. Ragnhild and Kwame entered, axes drawn, their faces streaked with blood and rain. Safia and Yuki slipped in behind, silent as ghosts, while Tormund's thunder shook the stones above. Callistos regarded them with a scholar's calm. "You have come far, Northmen, but you are too late. The world is already changing. The fire will spread, and with it, order my order. The North's chaos will be purged, rebuilt under a single enlightened hand." Ragnhild's voice was iron. "You would rule with fire and fear. That is not order, but tyranny." Callistos smiled, a serpent's smile. "You mistake strength for cruelty. The old ways are dead. Only those who seize the future will survive." He drew his sword, a Byzantine blade of exquisite craft, and gestured to Kwame. "Come, Chain-Breaker. Show me if you are truly free, or only another tool of your betters." Kwame stepped forward, his great axe in hand, a prophecy burning in his heart. The duel began, a clash of raw power against honed skill, the ring of steel echoing through the chamber. Callistos moved with the precision of a master, his blade a blur, his words a poison. "You fight for others' causes, slave. You break one chain only to wear another. You are still bound." Kwame's breath came hard, his arms trembling. But as the duel raged, he saw not Callistos, but every master who had ever tried to shape his fate. He remembered the faces of his shield siblings, the hope in the eyes of those he had freed, the promise he had made to himself. With a roar, Kwame broke through Callistos' guard, his axe shattering the general's sword. "This is the chain I break," he thundered, and with a final blow, he felled the serpent of Byzantium. As Callistos fell, Ragnhild raced to the eye. Codex, her axes flashing. Safia and Yuki covered her, dispatching the last of the defenders. Ragnhild seized the master codex, its pages fluttering in the storm wind, and hurled it into the heart of the burning fortress. The flames leapt higher, devouring the knowledge that had nearly destroyed the world. The tower shook, stones cracking, the sea stack trembling as if the gods themselves had struck it. "Out!" Ragnhild shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The warband fled down the collapsing stairs, the fortress crumbling around them. Tormund guided the Wyrm's Tooth to the base of the cliffs, the storm's fury now their shield. They leapt aboard as the sea stack collapsed, the fortress sliding into the waves, fire and stone swallowed by the drinking sea. The warband, battered and grieving, watched as the last of the old world vanished beneath the storm. The codex was gone, Callistos defeated, but the cost had been great. Kwame stood at the prow, the chain at his wrist finally broken. Ragnhild looked to her crew, her voice soft but unyielding. "We have done what we must. The world will change, but it will not burn." The storm eased, the dawn breaking over the horizon. The saga's end was near, but its echoes would thunder for generations. The storm's fury faded as the Wyrm's Tooth limped north, her sails patched, her crew silent in the dawn's pale light. Behind them, the sea still boiled where the fortress had fallen. The last embers of Callisto's ambition ground beneath. The waves. The warband gathered on the deck, battered and bloodied, the weight of their journey settling upon them like a shroud. Ragnhild stood at the prow, her eyes on the horizon, the salt wind tangling her hair. The codex was gone, its secrets lost to fire and sea, but the world it had threatened to create could not be so easily undone. The knowledge had spread whispered in the halls of jarls, etched in the memories of rebels, hidden in the minds of those who had glimpsed its power. The North would never again be as it was. One by one, the warband gathered around her. Kwame, his chains finally broken, stood tall, his gaze steady. Yuki, the ghost of the rising sun, watched the waves, her honor restored and her place among her shield siblings secure. Sophia, her hands, still stained with ash, wept quietly for the knowledge she had destroyed and the lives it had cost. Tormund, the storm's own son, guided the ship with a steady hand, his eyes reflecting both sorrow and hope. They mourned Grimnar, whose laughter would never again echo across the deck, whose sacrifice had bought them this fragile peace. They spoke his name and the names of all they had lost, their voices rising in a song that mingled grief and pride. As the coast of the north appeared, green and wild beneath the summer sky, Ragnhild turned to her crew. "We are the last of the old ways," she said, her voice carrying over the waves. "The first of the new. Let the skalds sing of the day Vikings chose wisdom over slaughter, when we broke the chain of vengeance before it consumed us all." Kwame nodded, his voice deep and sure. "We are free, not because we destroyed the codex, but because we chose what to do with its power." Yuki's eyes shone with quiet strength. "We are not what the world made us. We are what we make of ourselves." Sophia, her tears drying in the wind, managed to smile. "Let this be the last fire I ever kindle." Tormund raised his hand to the sky, feeling the wind shift. "The storm has passed. The world has changed, but we are still here." The Worm's Tooth sailed on, her crew united by bonds stronger than blood. They had no treasure, no titles, only the knowledge of what they had done, and the hope that their choices would echo through the ages. The saga ended not with a feast or a king's reward, but with the quiet certainty that the world would remember them, not as conquerors, but as those who stood at the edge of the old world and chose a different path. As the sun rose over the northern sea, Ragnhild whispered the final words of their tale. "We are the thunder before the dawn. Let the world remember." And so the saga closed, its echoes rolling on, a new age dawning on the bones of the old.